Correct.
And I used and you know, Jax, you're absolutely right. And I was like, come on, you big dummies.
Have you noticed how Caitlin Clark's harshest detractors just stopped talking when she was setting WNBA records for months? Sheryl Swoopes spearheaded the attack on Clark by making untrue statements on her age, shot choice, and record-breaking career. Now, Cheryl Miller is exposing all of the lies.
If Caitlin Clark and Fever fans didn't already love Cheryl Miller, they're going to love her even more now after she was on All the Smoke and wanted to smoke with any Caitlin Clark haters.
In the most shocking part, Miller disclosed that Clark's presence is making everyone richer, even those attempting to bring her down. This isn't just about basketball anymore. When she said, "Come on, you big dummies," on the All the Smoke podcast, she wasn't just defending Clark. She was exposing a pattern that had been occurring since Clark first came to the public's attention.
Legend. It's kind of funny. Nancy Lieberman, Cheryl Miller, both have all the respect in the world for Caitlin Clark and can tell what she's doing for not only women's sports, women's basketball, but women's sports.
Have you ever noticed the strange tension in women's basketball lately? Some of the biggest legends in the sport appear intent on discrediting Caitlin Clark from the first minute she entered the spotlight, but no one, I mean no one, has been more persistently critical than Sheryl Swoopes.
And I'm talking about the Indiana Fever, and I had to get on, somebody we both have incredible respect for, Sheryl Swoopes. You're a champion on every level, one of the greatest players in WNBA history. Because I said, how do you mention the Indiana Fever and all of these other players, and you don't mention Caitlin Clark? And then all of a sudden, she gets on me and calls me a coward and all of this other stuff.
Let's go back in time and examine what has been going on since this wasn't a single mishap or poor move. Rather, it seems like a planned campaign against Clark began long before she even applied for the WNBA draft.
There was this quote by Cheryl that said, Caitlin was, 25 years old. She was, 24 years old. She was a fifth-year senior. Right. She was taking 40 shots a game. Her records were illegitimate.
One of Swoopes' most ludicrous assertions was that Clark was essentially a 25-year-old competing against 20-year-olds in college, which is completely untrue. When challenged out on this obvious deception, Clark, who was 22 during her senior year and quite normal for a college senior, attempted to backtrack, claiming that she was just employing hyperbole in relation to COVID eligibility standards. Come on, that's not hyperbole. That's fabricating a story.
Right now, it probably takes about 40 shots a game. You have a 25-year-old playing against a 20-year-old. Mm-hmm. You should be killing them.
The attacks only became more bizarre from there. Swoopes continued to accuse Clark of taking an absurd 40 shots per game, but in actuality, Clark averaged 22.7 shots per game. What's even more intriguing is that, during her own senior year, she only took 3 more shots than she did. Talk about throwing stones from a glass.
But you asked me about Caitlin. If you're going to break a record, to me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that player set it.
As Clark got closer to the NC Litlia all-time scoring record, she began to make entirely untrue suggestions that he needed a 5th year to do what prior greats had done in 4. Like others before her, Clark beat the record in 4 years. However, what Swoopes cleverly overlooked was that Clark really chose not to use the additional year of COVID eligibility that was given to her.
So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record?
The trend persisted into Clark's professional career. Swoopes boldly predicted that Clark wouldn't have much of an impact in the UMBA, creating the expectation that she would struggle there. However, what actually happened was that Clark led the league in assists per game with 8.4 and averaged 19.2 points per game in her rookie season. Suddenly, Swoopes became very quiet about those predictions.
She's a senior, but I think her COVID year was last year or this year. I don't know.
If one is going to run with falsehoods such as these, at least know, okay? At least know how many years the person you are talking about.
When Swoopes made an appearance on Angel Reese's podcast, she was continuing to disparage Clark while also asserting that I don't detest her. It's a classic case of stating one thing while doing another. The contradiction was so blatant that it was almost humorous. That was one of the most illuminating moments.
I said, you know, you can say whatever you want. You can have your own opinion about anybody, but you do have to get the statistics right. I mean, facts matter. And if you just get ahead of this and just say, hey, I made a mistake on my numbers, then this thing is over and everybody respects you for your opinion.
Because of her remarks about Clark, Swoopes was really taken off of a Fever game broadcast. Nancy Lieberman took her place, and she didn't hold back in calling out all the false information being propagated about the rookie star.
And, you know, you might like Boston, I might like the Yankees. You know, it's okay to have difference of opinions.
The basketball gods sent in the cavalry just as Clark appeared to be completely encircled by detractors with nowhere to turn. Cheryl Miller entered the All the Smoke podcast, not merely to talk basketball, but prepared to give the most sincere defense of Caitlin Clark we have ever seen from a basketball legend.
You recently coached the WNBA All-Star game. You spent some time with Caitlin Clark.
Best coaching job ever.
Best coaching job
Best
ever.
coaching job ever.
Why Miller's viewpoint is so potent in contrast to all those detractors hurling insults from the sidelines during the 2024 WNBA All-Star game. Miller actually coached Clark. She observed the rookie talent up close and observed her work ethic firsthand, and she wasn't going to let the nonsense to go unchecked.
I'm going to be honest because it needs to be said. I can relate to that young lady, and I felt for her.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to be a black woman and hated because of my
Skin.
color.
Yeah.
Miller was just warming up for that viral "come on you big dummies" moment that has been making the rounds. But what happened next was a masterclass in how a real icon defends a rising star. Miller used the kind of authority that only someone with her basketball credentials could have to methodically destroy every untrue story that had been spread about Clark.
You know, I'm playing at a high level, but it's been a blessing just to watch the women grow and watch the women find their voices, use their platforms, and finally get paid.
Right.
That's been, if anything, the flowers for me is to see their achievements now.
You recently coached the WNBA All-Star game. You spent some time with Caitlin Clark.
Best coaching job ever.
Best coaching job
Best
ever.
coaching job ever.
Being around Caitlin Clark, how was the experience for her? She's such a big star. I mean, the sky's the limit for her. To be around her, just talk about the type of person she is, how much she loves the game.
I'm going to be honest because it needs to be said. I can relate to that young lady, and I felt for her.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to be a black woman and hated because of my
Skin.
color.
Yeah.
I can't imagine this young lady, I don't want to use hate, but despised.
Mm-hmm.
And people just having, she brought some on herself a little bit because she's cocky for a good reason.
Mm-hmm. Confident.
And I love that about her.
However, this is where Miller's criticism becomes even more devastating since she brought out something that Clark's detractors conveniently overlook. This rookie isn't only playing fantastic basketball, she's also improving the WNBA as a whole. Miller made it abundantly evident that Clark's presence is advantageous to everyone, even those who are attempting to undermine her.
But to watch the dynamics and the media, they had their narrative. And I was pleased and proud to see the narrative wasn't the truth.
Can you fathom what it must be like to have legends of the game appear to be against you? TRU, the Hall of Famer, described how she witnessed Clark manage the tremendous pressure of getting smacked with everything left and right during her first season. Miller was among the few to provide Clark with unwavering support after witnessing this loneliness personally.
It's just been fascinating to watch these young ladies come up and now take the baton and take it to a different level.
Miller recounted an extremely touching event following Indiana's first victory, saying, "Oh man, finally somebody who's on my side," when she saw me. Miller noted that, for a little moment, One of the most renowned rookies in sports history felt so alone that the sight of a single, amiable face elicited the kind of response that reveals everything about what Clark has been going through behind the scenes.
Is she getting hyped? Yes. But she was in the backyard. She was putting in the same time, sometimes maybe more than you were.
Right.
I can't fault her for what she was given.
Provided, however, Miller gave Clark more than just shoulder pats and meaningless remarks. She gave her the kind of advice that only someone who had been in her shoes could give. Keep being you no matter what. That simple statement became Clark's lifeline in the face of the barrage of criticism that had followed her from day one.
I mean, look, as much as she was given, you can't tell me if that door would have swung the other way where she didn't live up to the hype.
Right.
Come on, folks are still waiting for her to fall.
Exactly.
Come on.
Yep.
So, with that being said, you big dummies, you getting paid now.
Right.
Everybody now has an opportunity to pull up their chair and have a seat.
And for anyone doubting Clark's work ethic, Miller put an end to it with the ferocity of someone who has witnessed the reality. She was in the backyard working just as hard, sometimes even more, than you were. That's not rumors or conjecture. It's a Hall of Famer with first-hand knowledge, and she blasted Clark's detractors for doubting her commitment.
So that's the only thing, and thank God I don't listen to, I don't follow social media, and I could really care less because I've been delivered from being a people pleaser and what you think about me.
Miller went on to highlight how challenging Clark's situation has been, saying, "I can't imagine this young lady not despised think about that a basketball legend looking at what Clark faces and admitting she can barely comprehend how anyone could handle that level of scrutiny and negativity."
But I will tell you one thing. I'm just glad that these young ladies who are at the upper tier players, I hope and pray that they have a solid foundation. And they know guys, who they are. Because you know how vicious it is out there.
When Cheryl Miller coached Clark at the All-Star game, she entered with one viewpoint but left completely blown away by aspects of the rookie's game that critics conveniently ignored. What Miller learned that day explains why she thinks the future of the Fever isn't just bright, it's championship caliber promising. It's possible that the negativity surrounding Clark is causing people to lose sight of what makes her unique on the court.
It was like, just fly, and watching her pass, and I didn't know how talented she was and how well she sees the game in a 3D version, thinker. Defensively, a lot better than I thought and gave her credit for.
Everyone is so preoccupied with Clark's shooting and scoring stats that they fail to notice what makes her stand out from other gifted athletes. Miller had the unique chance to work closely with Clark as his coach, and what she saw was a level of basketball knowledge that goes beyond the stat sheet. It was not simply Clark's skill that struck her as impressive, but something far more significant for creating a winning team.
So watching her and just spending a little time, and one thing, guys, that I've learned is to step back and let these kids be themselves.
What has particularly attracted Miller's attention is her passing, which is the one aspect of that young player's game that I don't believe many really value. Miller stressed that while everyone is discussing her shooting percentages or scoring totals, take a moment to consider that. Clark's court vision and passing ability are cited by Miller, one of the best players in history, as her most unappreciated abilities.
And when she coached at the WNBA All-Star game, of course, her and Clark had a little bit of a rapport and a vibe, and that was a story at the time.
Additionally, it goes beyond simply making the obvious passes. Miller noticed that Clark seemed to be seeing the game in 3 dimensions, which is distinct from how most players see the court. Others see it in 2, but she has a rare gift that cannot be taught that turns decent offenses into great ones. Her spatial awareness enables her to foresee passing lanes before they open and generate opportunities that other players simply don't recognize.
But I think the obvious point, too, that I've made a million times with Caitlin Clark, she's a basketball genius. She sees the floor as well as any player I've ever seen. Like right there, like with the titans of the game when it comes to seeing the floor. That's what, to me, separates her more than anything else.
However, this is where Miller's analysis becomes quite intriguing. Keep in mind how critics consistently assault Clark's defense. With first-hand observation, Miller completely upended that narrative by saying that Clark was defensively much better than I had assumed, and giving her credit for it. This isn't just a hot take. It's Cheryl Miller, a basketball legend and Hall of Fame gamer, directly disputing one of the most frequent accusations made against Clark.
But it takes a true gift to have that kind of court vision that she has. And Cheryl Miller recognized that. There in the clip, of course.
Miller's compliments went farther. Beyond Clark specifically, she was persuaded that something extraordinary was developing in Indiana by what she saw while coaching the All-Star game. The future of Indiana is really bright. Miller asserted that it's practically a prediction of championship possibility and not just idle hope from someone with Miller's level of basketball expertise.
You know, whenever somebody of prominence who's been around the game, the old guard, if you will, doesn't push Caitlin Clark to the side and embraces her, that has a certain impact on her fan base, and Cheryl Miller did that emphatically.
Miller was most impressed by the Fever's mental approach to the game rather than just their physical prowess. This highlights an important aspect of championship teams that casual fans frequently overlook. It's not just about athletic ability, but also the cerebral aspects of basketball comprehension that distinguish good teams from great ones.
Those two are the foundation of the great stories and narratives coming out of the NCAA now, flooding the dub, which helps
the basketball intelligence dub, with Clark's outstanding court vision and passing ability leading the way, and a roster that processes the game at an elite level, Miller Witness suggests that Indiana isn't just assembling talented players. They're creating a team with the mental framework to compete at the highest level. The groundwork for something special is obviously being laid.
My main thing, I want to see how we as women, because again, I know they're going to get mad at me for saying this, we can be petty, we can be short-sighted.
No. No. This is my first time hearing this.
We can, but I'm just hoping that we can embrace one another, whether you're playing for the dub or you're playing in Unrivaled.
This is more than simply a sporting rivalry. It's a potent instance of intergenerational support, which basketball sorely needed. Miller didn't just defend Clark. She also revealed how the rookie's influence is altering everyone's financial situation. Having said that, you big fools are getting paid now, and that's the final blow critics can't get over. Clark's presence is literally putting money in their pockets.
And I just hope, again, backtracking, that we as women can understand and embrace we all have a seat at the table, and it's for the betterment of the sport.
The Indiana Fever aren't just producing a star, they're creating something unique. Miller recognizes that they have great basketball skills and a fearlessness that makes them the team no one wants to play against. With Miller's guidance and Clark's talent, we're witnessing the beginning of what may turn out to be the next NBA dynasty. The partnership between these two basketball minds says a lot about the direction that women's basketball is taking.